Anyway, let's move on. Let's hit up our next topic. Nick, you're our Magic the Gathering guy. We have a new sort of announcement or story, basically, that there was a ban restriction update as of yesterday. Here we are.
Yeah.
So here's the new announcements for the ban and restriction for the different stuff. If Nick, you want to run us through this?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, usually there's not a lot of bannings when it comes to standard, unless there's any glaring issues, they never really get any bans. Same thing with like Ponder, and same thing with Modern, but they all get touched a lot more than the older formats. And so on this one, the only person that got really hit were the top 2 decks in Modern. Both play Violent Outburst. And the only way to really deal with combos or cards of these natures, and just a quick rundown, Violent Outburst allows you to basically cascade into another spell in your deck. And cascade is, when you play this card, remove the top card to your library from the game until you reveal a non-land card that costs less, and then cast it. You get to cast it for free. In Magic the Gathering and in any game, if something costs resources and you don't have to use resources to cast something or do something, it's always plus and it's always broken. This specific instance, it's an instant. And because it's an instant, you're allowed to do it on your opponent's turn. And because you can do it on your opponent's turn, the only defensive spells that Modern has is Force of Negation. I always get the name messed up, but I'm pretty sure it's Force of Negation. And basically, you can play it for free if it's your opponent's turn. And because this is an instant, they can do it on your turn. And you can't do anything about it for the most part. So it lacks a lot of counterplay, and so they're banning it. It doesn't stop these decks, but because there's 3 mana cards that do the exact same thing as far as cascading, except they're sorceries. So you have to do it on your turn. So it's just slowing you down a little bit to give someone some sort of counterplay.
Well, yeah, it seems like it's making it. It seems like it's making it more defensive rather than aggressive, like you said, adding counterplay back into it.
Like it'll still be like aggressive for the most part, because like the spell that they go into is just rhinos. You put out 4/4 rhino tokens for free.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, like there's a couple other like things that you can do with the deck. Yeah, it's just your opponent's ability to actually interact with the spell at the time in which they cast it. And so that's the reason why this is getting hit, because there's other options for them. So it shouldn't take them out of the top 5 decks. But again, 2 of the top decks, the number 1 and number 2 spot, were decks that ran Violent Outburst. And, so they're banned. So they'll have to change a little bit, but they should be in the top contenders. And then nothing got hit in Legacy, even though Grief should be. But, don't let anybody know that I said that, because I'll just get screamed at. But anyway, then Ponder got unrestricted. And like unrestrictions are cool, but they usually don't mean too much, especially in Vintage. And this is just it's a card advantage card. It just lets you to see 4 cards at most. Usually it's like 3 cards, you get the shuffle, and you draw a card. That's it. Gotcha. So they're just bringing fair blue back. They're trying to bring fair blue back.
They're trying to make a blue deck more viable.
Yeah, I mean, there's some other, like, we can argue if another deck is like fair blue or not, but like that's not, the fact that we'd have to argue it is evidence of itself. That it's probably not a fair blue deck, but but anyway, so that's really like.
Yeah, so like generally speaking, when I see like patch notes or bans, unbans kind of lists, I'm very surprised to see that this is like there's only 2 happening here. And that's, I guess that's like, a philosophy of small changes, especially on printed materials and situations. But then like,
if you look down,
I'm sorry.
If you look down at the bottom of the page, they usually have like, and like I read some of the stuff that they talk about. Can you go lower? Yeah. And so like right here, this is what they're talking about it.
They'll
talk about like their reasons. Yeah. And everything like that. And then you can get to my format, which is Legacy. And like, I would have choice words for the people who wrote this. Like, you're a bunch of Death and Taxes players. That's all I got to say. You're afraid of Orcish Bowmaster. That's end of story.
I don't even want to. for the last week, you've been really like just going on about this grief card and that it needs to be banned. And then you were so livid to see this, that it wasn't banned yesterday, that nobody seems to think that this card's a problem.
There's people who think it's a problem, but they're using grief. And they're also winning tournaments. So like I used grief for a very long time. Like I was playing Reanimator. It's just an extremely strong card. It's like we don't even have to go into it. It just removes the amount of cards that are in your opponent's hand, and spells can be countered in Magic the Gathering. This is one of the most counterable spells in the game. So it can be countered, but the odds of you actually saying I'm going to counter that are probably 2 out of 10. Just in general.
In fairness, that doesn't make it uncounterable. It's just players are choosing not to counter it, not realizing this is the threat or this is a threat.
The only way to counter it in most cases is to remove 2 cards from your hand to counter it. The counter spell and the thing that allows you to cast the counter spell. And if they're already going to take 1, why are you going to give them 2? That's the reason why it's uncounterable. So like if you like you're going to try to stop, like you need to have 3 or 4 cards to stop it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It doesn't math. So
it doesn't
and if you take a mulligan and you're less on cards, like we can go into the whole
it's more of a disadvantage. But gotcha. Yeah. It's like starting blackjack with only 1 card rather than 2.
Yep. It just makes poor play patterns. It doesn't ever feel good. And it doesn't make you feel good to really grief and re-grief somebody is the reason why I say it. But as you can look back on that page, Wizards of the Coast doesn't even talk about grief. They talk about Orcish Bowmaster because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And Orcish Bowmaster is a huge complaint card because it took out like a deck called Death and Taxes. And it's a very good entry-level deck that's cheap that got hit by Orcish Bowmaster.
So in that way, it seems like they kind of balance on the philosophy of player sentiment more so, or what would you think?
Like probably in some cases, yeah. Like there's a card called Ragavan that's a 2/1 monkey that like it's a problem, but I don't think it's as much of a problem as people made it out to be. But that one got banned. He's a 2/1 monkey that takes cards off the top of your deck. You get treasure tokens. He's a good advantage card. It's a very good card just in general.
Yeah.
But it's not busted. It's just really hard to deal with and does make pretty bad play patterns. Like anytime a card makes bad play patterns, you just need to get rid of it in the format because people end up doing stupid stuff to counter it in their deck. Excuse me. Making the meta just not great.
Right. Rather than going 1 for 1, you're going 5 for 1 kind of thing.
Yeah. So
gotcha.
It's just not great. Yeah.
Yeah. The math ain't mathin'. And that's a lot of what Magic is, math.
Yep. And the other card that they talk about is Broadside Bombardiers. Like both of these cards, like Orcish Bowmasters was made like 10 months ago. Broadside Bombardiers was made very recently. I can't even remember, like a couple months.
But that's kind of interesting too, because these 2 decks were some of the top 8 in the last 2 major tournaments we talked about, the Chicago tournament and then this one in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, like, so Orcish Bowmaster is in a lot of decks that run black. It's a fine card. It like you there's ways to deal with it. You can counter it if you want, but like there's like one of the pros convinced me. Like I had a little bit more of an issue with Orcish Bowmaster, but basically his word was like you can deal with Orcish Bowmaster, but you're going to counter Narset. And basically Orcish Bowmaster is anytime your opponent draws an additional card, you get to deal 1 damage and you get to amass 1. So it's make a 1/1 token or make that 1/1 token a 2/2, 3/3, 4/4, 5/5. Right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it just grows. Okay. And that's why it's seeing a lot of play is because Brainstorm and Ponder and Force of Will have been legacy staples since Legacied. Like that's just it. Like
yeah, that's something that they're talking about here. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just they've been there forever. Brainstorm is I won't even say my opinions on Brainstorm. Okay.
All right.
Like,
we'll save it for another day.
Like me and a bunch of people will start fighting. The card is broken and that's it. And then there's Ponder. Ponder just got unrestricted. Yeah. It's a good card. It's a very good card. And then Force of Will is a bad card that's good in situations. But another situation where people might argue with me that it's a good card, it's a bad card. You lose a card from your hand and you lose 1 life to stop something from happening right now, and that's it. So you go from 7 to 5, and you just stop something from happening. Like,
it's a 2 for 1, but yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, that's the only way to get rid of grief. Just to let you know, it's that force of will. So that's what I was saying before.
Only thing, right?
The only thing. So you're either losing 2 cards to stop 1, and then they're going to do it again to you, and they're going to take 3 cards. So would you rather have them take 2 cards or 3 cards? And again, the math ain't mathing, right? Like, you're going to let them take the 2 cards.
Well, Nick, you seem to be selling yourself short, like as far as people agreeing with you, but like it does seem that one of the pro players does agree in some degree, agrees with you. Just talking about recap of the weekend, but then talking about, grief being a bit of a problem in general.
Yeah, I mean, he goes into it multiple different times. He won't. He's very, like, I joke and I say he's like extreme. He has an extreme media trained vernacular. He's very good at not like completely taking a stance on like this card needs to be banned. But even in this video, he talks about how like the overall impact. In the beginning of the video, when he goes over his deck tech, he literally says like, "But grief is extremely like I didn't realize how powerful grief was," and it's a little bit farther down because he did modern too.
Okay, legacy.
Yeah, basically like right around there. And so like he literally starts to talk. He talks about it. Like you don't until you start playing like this specific version or a version that's similar to it, you don't know how powerful grief is, and it's too powerful, like in my opinion. And like and he's not going to come out right and say that because this deck's only been around for like 2 weeks. So
right, you can't go sensational, and we'll see how the curve kind of goes with this. If sentiment actually changes with the player base, but. Definitely interesting to see.
The player base is a bunch of blue haters. Like everybody hates blue. Like so they're I call them grief apologists.
Well, blue is the type. The blue is the type to say no, you can't do this. We're the fun police.
Yeah, exactly. Like because it stopped you from doing fun things once, you hate it for the rest of your life. Like that cool thing that I spent my whole deck to try to do, and they stopped it one time.
Right.
But anyway.
Yeah. It's cool to see these Magic tournaments and the meta defining and how players are reacting with it. It'll be interesting to see what happens next with more tournaments that are coming up. The next ban list that's going to come out is about 6 months, I believe. I read that correctly, Nick. Yeah. Yeah,
it's going to be a while. Like unless like we have sets that come out all the time, and unless like a card comes out that breaks one of these decks that they've already seen, then we won't be seeing a ban for a while.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
All right. Well, hopefully you can see some meta shifting, some player power come through, and some honesty with themselves about what's really bothering them. But let's move on.
We're all going to play cheese. It's fine.
Hey, you got to math that math. All right.